Something happened this week that you almost didn't notice. Someone said, the thing that used to wreck your whole day. And this time, nothing happened. You just stood there, calm. That silence inside you was not empty. It was full of something new. You waited for the old feeling to arrive. The tight chest, the racing thoughts, the need to defend yourself. It never came. And a quiet question rose instead. What changed? To understand that question, we have to go back to the moment this all began. Somewhere in your past, a moment cut deep. A parent's harsh word, a friend's betrayal, a time you felt small, unseen, unsafe. That moment didn't just pass, it left a mark. And marks like that don't stay quiet forever. That old mark became a switch, and in certain moments in your adult life, ordinary moments, you learned how to flip it. A tone of voice, a silence, a look. Suddenly, you weren't in the present anymore. You were somewhere much older, reliving something you never fully finished feeling. Carl Jung noticed something strange in his patients. Calm, intelligent people who could suddenly turn into someone else entirely, over a tone of voice, a delay in a text, a look across a room. He didn't ask why they were difficult. He asked a better question. What was actually taking over? His answer still explains almost every overreaction you've ever had. He called it a complex. Not the modern meaning, an insecurity. He meant something closer to a second self. A cluster of old pain living quietly inside you, with its own memory, its own voice, and its own agenda. And like anyone with an agenda, it waits for the right moment to take the wheel. When something touches that old wound, the complex takes over. For a few seconds or a few minutes, it borrows your voice, your body, your choices, and you say things you don't fully recognize. Afterward comes the question so many of us have quietly asked ourselves. Why did I react like that? That wasn't really me. Perhaps you've asked this exact question after your own outbursts, your own silences, your own moments of feeling completely taken over. That feeling of being taken over has a name, and understanding it is the first real step toward freedom. Here's what almost no one tells you. The moment may be real, and the other person may genuinely matter. But sometimes, the intensity comes from somewhere older, the meaning your unconscious attaches to what just happened. And that older meaning can turn an ordinary moment into something that feels much bigger. What feels like anger in the moment may actually be old fear. What feels like someone else's fault may actually be an unhealed part of you, finally being touched. This is uncomfortable to hear. It is also the doorway out. Jung called this part of ourselves the shadow. The pieces of us we learn to hide, deny, or disown. Not because they're evil, often simply because, once, they weren't safe to show. And what we refuse to look at inside ourselves, we start seeing everywhere else instead. This is projection. We take the parts of ourselves we haven't faced and place them onto other people. Their flaw becomes unbearable to us because, deep down, it's quietly familiar. As long as that projection stays in place, the trigger keeps all its power. But something remarkable happens the moment you finally turn and look at that shadow directly. The moment you ask, quietly, honestly, what part of this is actually mine? That single question begins to loosen a grip that has held you for years. Jung believed the complex never fully disappears, but it can lose its grip. Its energy doesn't vanish, it gets welcomed back home, into the part of you that can finally hold it with understanding. And when that happens, the outside world stops being able to control you from the inside. This is what real growth looks like. Not becoming a different person, becoming a fuller one. The parts you hid finally invited back inside, no longer needing to run the show from the shadows. But how do you actually know when this shift is happening inside you? Modern research offers an interesting parallel. When an old emotional memory is brought back into awareness, it may become temporarily more flexible, less fixed than it seemed before, as though the mind has briefly reopened something it thought was settled. And what happens in that brief opening can change what the memory means to you. If in that open window you experience something different from what you expected, safety instead of danger, understanding instead of attack, the old memory can begin to carry a different meaning, not erased and changed by what happens now. And this creates an interesting bridge between modern psychology and something Jung understood long ago. So the trigger doesn't disappear because you forgot the past. It loses its power because your mind and body finally learned, at the deepest level, that the danger is over. And once that message truly lands, everything about how you respond begins to shift. The first sign is small, almost invisible. It's a pause, a tiny gap that appears between the moment something happens and the moment you respond, where there used to be none. That pause is nothing. That pause is everything. In that pause, you're no longer a passenger inside your own reaction. For the first time, you get to choose. And choice is something the old, wounded part of you never had. But the pause is only the beginning of what changes. The second sign lives in the body. Your heart doesn't race the way it used to. Your shoulders don't climb toward your ears. There's no tight fist forming in your chest. Your body, quietly and without permission, stopped believing the old alarm. And afterward, something else disappears too. The looping. The imaginary arguments you used to replay for hours, rehearsing what you should have said. That mental noise simply goes quiet. Where that noise used to live, something new begins to grow. Perhaps you've noticed this yourself. A criticism that once would have ruined your entire week now simply passes through you, like weather. Present for a moment, then gone. But here's where it becomes important to slow down and look closer. But be careful here, because not all calm is real. Some of it is healing. Some of it is your mind protecting itself in a completely different disguise. And most people can't tell the two apart from the outside. From the inside, though, the difference is impossible to miss. Suppression looks calm from the outside. Inside, it's a clenched jaw and a racing heart, forced into silence through sheer effort. It doesn't heal the wound, it just holds the door shut. And a door held shut by force eventually gives way. Numbness is different again. It isn't calm at all. It's the system shutting down entirely, going blank rather than staying present. You feel distant from your own life, like watching it through glass. This isn't peace either. It's the body's last resort. Avoidance is another disguise. Carefully arranging your entire life so the trigger never appears again. That isn't freedom. That's still being ruled by it, just from a very careful distance. Real freedom looks different. It doesn't need to avoid anything at all. So how do you know the difference between real integration and simply hiding well? The answer is always in the body. Real calm feels open. Fake calm feels held together by force. And there's one more quiet clue that reveals which one is actually happening. Real integration doesn't need anyone else to behave differently. You can still feel the old moment matters. You just no longer feel like your survival depends on how the other person responds. And this quiet independence starts showing up in the most ordinary places. Take relationships. Someone you love needs a day of space, alone, no explanation. Notice what happens in your chest. That flicker is old. What you do with it next is new. Watch how that flicker gets handled now, in this same moment. You feel the old flicker, a small tug in your chest, and instead of chasing it away or acting on it, you simply notice it, name it quietly, and let your partner have their space. That noticing, without needing to act, is what integration actually feels like from the inside.
Take criticism at work. Somewhere in you, a much younger voice used to hear that as a verdict on your entire worth. Watch what happens when that voice no longer gets to answer for you. The difference shows up in what you do with the very next sentence.
You listen. You ask a question instead of building a defense. You separate the feedback about your work from your worth as a person, because those two things were never actually the same thing. This separation is one of the clearest signs that an old story has finally lost its grip.
Now here's something important,
Because this journey isn't always a straight line upward. Sometimes, just before a trigger finally loses its power, it flares up one last time, stronger than ever before. And this moment confuses almost everyone who experiences it.
If this happens to you, it is not failure, it is not regression. It is the old pattern making one last attempt to survive before it finally, quietly, lets go. Understanding this one truth can save you from giving up right before real change arrives.
One more thing worth knowing. Healing doesn't move at one speed. A frustration from last month might soften in weeks. A wound from childhood may take years. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because it's simply older and buried deeper. And the deepest ones ask for something most of us were never taught to give ourselves.
Patience. Some triggers reach back to a version of you so young, they formed before you even had the words for what was happening to you. Those take the longest to soften, and they deserve the gentlest hand. But even the oldest wounds send a signal when they finally begin to let go. And here is something that quietly surprises most people. Before the calm arrives, grief often arrives first. A soft sadness for the years spent reacting instead of understanding. This grief is not a setback. It is the final step before real peace. That grief is you finally accepting something important. The past cannot be changed, but your relationship to it can. And once you accept that, the old story stops needing to repeat itself. This is the moment something in you truly begins to settle. Even your dreams begin to change during this process. Jung noticed this in his own patients. Monsters that once chased them through their sleep grow smaller, or simply stop appearing at all. Your inner world is always speaking, even when you're not listening consciously. Nightmares of falling become dreams of standing on solid ground. Drowning becomes swimming. Being chased becomes, quite simply, walking forward calmly, unafraid of what might be behind you. This shift in the unconscious mirrors a shift happening in your waking life, whether you notice it or not. One thing this isn't: becoming someone who feels nothing. That's not healing, that's just a quieter kind of numbness, wearing healing's clothes. Real growth still feels things, it just stops being ruled by them. And what that actually looks like might surprise you. You will still feel things deeply. You may even still feel a small flicker sometimes. The difference is, the flicker no longer becomes a fire that burns down your whole day. And this is where the true meaning of this whole journey finally comes into focus. This isn't really a story about triggers at all. It's a story about becoming whole. Jung called this process individuation. Becoming, piece by piece, the entire person you were always meant to be. And every quiet, uneventful moment where you didn't react is proof that it's already happening. Every part of you that you once hid, the anger, the fear, the shame, was never meant to be erased. It was meant to be understood and welcomed back home, into the whole of who you are. And a person who has done this work carries something unmistakable. Quiet confidence, not the loud kind that needs an audience, the kind that doesn't flinch when life gets difficult because it isn't performing safety anymore. It simply is safety. This is what was actually happening in that ordinary moment we started with. When someone said the thing this week and you didn't react, that wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was years of quiet, patient work,
finally showing up in a single, ordinary moment. And moments like that are worth pausing to honor. You don't need to announce this kind of change. No one else has to notice the argument you didn't have, or the fear you didn't obey. Sometimes the clearest evidence is simply realizing you felt the old pull and chose differently. And when that happens, don't dismiss the moment just because it felt ordinary. So the next time an old trigger feels smaller than it used to, pause for a second. Remember how completely it once controlled you. Then notice what is different now. You may be standing inside a change you once thought impossible, because you are not the same person who first learned to react that way. You are not who you were when that wound first began. You are becoming whole, one quiet, unreacted moment at a time. And that, more than anything else, is what it means to know yourself. If you noticed yourself in this video, even once, that recognition is the beginning of real change. Stay a little longer, and let's keep discovering who you really are.